Welcome back to my YouTube channel. The champagne flute felt cold in my hand, a stark contrast to the warmth of the summer evening. We were on the patio, my parents beaming at my younger sister, Chloe. I was the practical one, the one with the spreadsheet for life. Chloe was the sparkler, beautiful, charismatic, and the perpetual center of their universe. "We think it's time," my father said, his voice dripping with a paternal concern I now recognize as condescension. "You're too reliant on us, sweetheart. It's stifling your potential. We're cutting you off. Consider it a push to truly fly." My mother nodded, her smile tight. "Chloe needs our support right now. You've always been so strong. You'll understand one day." They cheered as they said it, clinking their glasses together as if toasting my impending struggle. The financial cord was severed, and they expected tears, bargaining, the crumbling of the responsible daughter. Instead, I felt a terrifying crystalline calm. I looked at their triumphant faces, at Chloe's poorly concealed smirk, and I simply nodded. "Okay," I said, my voice quiet but steady. "I understand." I left quietly the next morning, my car packed with boxes containing 23 years of my life. I didn't slam the door. I didn't write a dramatic note. The silence of my exit was my first act of defiance. The following months were a blur of fluorescent lights and instant ramen. I rented a studio apartment, so small I could touch opposite walls. I worked 2 jobs, my laptop humming on a rickety IKEA desk. I assembled myself, my fingers flying across the keyboard in the dead of night. While my family thought I was drowning, I was learning to breathe fire. I was building a digital marketing agency, one small terrified client at a time. The hunger pangs were no longer just in my stomach. They were in my soul. Then came the photo. It lit up the family group chat I'd muted months ago. A picture of Chloe, grinning ear to ear, holding a giant, ridiculous red ribbon in front of a gleaming high-rise condo. The caption from my mother read, "So proud of our girl. Keys to her first home. We knew she'd do amazing things with our support." The flaunted condo ribbon, as I came to think of it, was more than a gift. It was a monument to their bias. I stared at the image, the marble countertops, and floor-to-ceiling windows, a stark contrast to my own chipped laminate, and view of a brick wall. A hollow feeling threatened to consume me. But then I looked at my laptop screen, at the analytics of my now thriving agency. I smiled. Their ribbon was for a box someone else bought for her. I was building my own foundation. I didn't respond. I closed the chat and went back to work. Days later, my phone erupted, not with a few pings, but with a continuous frantic vibration that shook the rickety desk. It was the muted family chat. Dozens of messages poured in, a digital avalanche of shock. "Mom, is this a joke? Someone explain this right now." "Dad, this has to be a different, my name. A typo. Chloe. Lol, no way. That Photoshop fail." Confused, I opened a news app. And there it was, the headline I'd been secretly hoping for, but never dared to believe. Forbes, 30, under 30, tech and innovation list, topped by self-made marketing prodigy. And right below it, my name, my company's name, my story. I didn't type a word in the chat. I simply took a screenshot of the Forbes article and posted it. A single silent image that spoke volumes. Then, I pressed the leave group button. The explosion of their shock and sudden desperate pride was a noise I no longer had to hear. My story isn't about revenge. It's about resonance. It's about the power that unlocks when you stop seeking validation from the very people who undervalue you. They gave me silence, and I built a symphony with it. The patio stones still held the day's heat, radiating it back up as the sun bled orange into the horizon. It was a picture-perfect setting, the kind my mother loved to curate. My father swirled an expensive bourbon in his glass, the ice cubes clinking like tiny warning bells. I remember the precise way my mother patted her lips with a linen napkin, a prelude to something significant. I was midway through explaining my business plan for a niche digital marketing agency. My spreadsheet open on the tablet between us, numbers gleaming with what I thought was irrefutable logic. My sister, Chloe, was painting her nails a pearlescent pink, contributing nothing but the acrid scent of polish remover to the conversation. My father cut me off, not with a shout, but with a voice of smooth paternal finality. "We think it's time," he said, and the world tilted. He explained that my dependency was a crutch, that true greatness was forged in struggle. My mother chimed in, her words coated in a syrupy concern that failed to mask the steel beneath. "We're doing this for you, darling. You're so capable, but you're playing it safe. This is the push you need to really fly." And then came the part that stole the air from my lungs. "Chloe," my father said, casting a fond glance at my sister, "has a more delicate temperament. She needs our support. You've always been our strong one." As they spoke these words, they smiled. They actually raised their glasses, a toast to my impending hardship. They cheered their own decision, their faces lit with the conviction of benevolent architects, building my character through planned poverty. I looked from my father's triumphant gaze to my mother's placid smile, and finally to Chloe, who offered a tiny, smug shrug as if to say, "That's just the way it is." A scream, a tear, a plea. That's what they expected from their strong daughter. They were braced for a storm of protest, so I gave them nothing. I let the silence hang, let it become heavier than any outburst could have been. I felt every dream they just pronounced dead, every safety net they just sliced away, but I refused to let it show on my face. My composure was the only weapon I had left. I looked my father directly in the eye, my voice unnervingly calm, a flat lake after a rejected hurricane. "Okay," I said, the single word hanging in the fragrant evening air. "I understand." And in that moment, I did understand. I understood that my journey was no longer theirs to chart. Their calculated cutoff was not my end. It was my beginning, and I would make sure it was a story they would one day read about, but never be a part of. The silence of my departure was a tangible thing, a heavy cloak I wrapped around myself as I loaded the last box into my beat-up sedan. The dawn air was cold and clean, a stark contrast to the cloying, champagne-scented atmosphere of the night before. I didn't look back at the house, with its manicured lawn and curtained windows, hiding their sleeping, self-satisfied forms. There was no note, no final text, no slamming door to serve as a dramatic punctuation mark. My absence would be my statement. The first night in my new apartment, a studio that was little more than a glorified closet with a hot plate. I sat on the bare floor, my back against the wall, and listened to the unfamiliar sounds of the city. A distant siren, the hum of a faulty neon sign across the street, the footsteps of the neighbor above. The space was so small I could stretch out my arms and nearly touch both walls. It smelled of old carpet and industrial cleaner, a far cry from the lavender and lemon polish of my old home. This wasn't a setback. It was a blank canvas. I unpacked only the essentials. My laptop, a stack of textbooks, a single pot for boiling water. My dinner that night, and for many nights after, was a packet of instant ramen, the salty steam fogging up the single window that looked out onto a brick wall. But with every bland mouthful, a fierce, defiant energy grew inside me. The hunger in my stomach was a constant reminder, not of what I had lost, but of what I was fighting for. While my family likely pictured me drowning in self-pity, I was building an empire in the shadows. My rickety IKEA desk became my command center, the glow of the screen my sun and moon. I took on freelance gigs no one else wanted, working until my vision blurred and my shoulders ached. The quiet they had forced upon me became my greatest asset. There were no distractions, no voices of doubt, no one to question the impossible hours I was keeping. The struggle was no longer a theoretical concept my parents had cheerfully described. It was the gritty, beautiful, and terrifying reality of my every waking moment. I was learning to breathe a different kind of air, and it was making me stronger. Weeks had bled into months, a monotonous but purposeful stream of work, sleep, and the occasional necessary human interaction. I had muted the family group chat, a simple act of digital self-preservation that felt like building a seawall against a tide I knew was coming. It arrived on a Tuesday afternoon, a silent digital tsunami. My phone, face up on my rickety desk, suddenly illuminated with a cascade of notifications. Not calls, but a flurry of images and exclamation points flooding the very chat I had tried to ignore. Against my better judgment, I tapped the screen, and there she was. Chloe, her smile a blinding perfect crescent, standing in front of the soaring glass-fronted lobby of the Apex, the city's newest and most talked about luxury condominium tower. The sun glinted off the polished brass fittings. She wasn't just holding keys. She was gripping a giant, absurdly wide red ribbon, stretched diagonally across the double-door entrance, as if she had just won a game show. Her other hand was held aloft, fingers splayed in a triumphant wave. The caption from my mother was a masterwork of passive aggression. So proud of our girl. Keys to her first home, a testament to what she can achieve with a little belief and support. We knew she'd do amazing things. The flaunted condo ribbon. It was more than a photograph. It was a declaration. It was a meticulously staged tableau of their value system, a monument to their favoritism, built of marble, glass, and debt. I could almost smell the new paint and privilege through the screen. I zoomed in on the image, my thumb and forefinger stretching the digital photo until Chloe's grinning face pixelated. I traced the lines of the granite countertops, visible in the reflection of the glass, the potted ficus trees, the uniformed doorman hovering just out of focus. My eyes stung for a moment, not with jealousy for the condo itself, but for the vicious, unspoken comparison it was meant to draw. They had given her a foundation made of their money and their constant coddling belief. In that moment, the hollow feeling in my stomach had nothing to do with the meager lunch I'd skipped, and everything to do with the realization that this was their ultimate verdict on my own journeys. They were celebrating the prize, not the work. They were cheering for the ribbon, not the race. I let the phone fall back onto the desk with a dull thud. The glow from my laptop screen, filled with the analytics of my growing agency, seemed to brighten in response. A cool blue light pushing back against the warm, gilded image of their approval. Their ribbon was for a beautiful, expensive box, and I was building the ground it stood on. While their world narrowed to the square footage of a luxury condo and the gleam of a new appliance, mine was expanding into a universe of code, contracts, and quiet victories. The flaunted condo ribbon had been a catalyst, solidifying my resolve not with bitterness, but with a cold, clear focus. The four walls of my shoebox apartment became the boundaries of my own personal forge. By day, I was a ghost in the machine of a corporate marketing firm, my mind numbed by tedious tasks, but my observations sharp, learning everything about what not to do. By night, I shed that skin and became an architect of my own destiny. The hum of my laptop was the soundtrack to my ascent. I lived on a diet of cheap coffee, determination, and the intoxicating high of a problem solved. I took the clients no one else wanted, the idealistic startup with a tiny budget, the quirky artisan with a terrible website, and I poured my soul into them. I worked until 3 a.m., crafting campaigns that felt less like advertising and more like manifestos. I learned to code, to design, to negotiate, my failures as valuable as my successes. Each one a brick, mortared into my foundation. There were moments of profound doubt, sitting on the floor surrounded by scribbled-on notepads. my bank account balance a terrifyingly low number. But then a client would write back, ecstatic about their first major sale. Or a website I'd built would go live, and a surge of pure, unadulterated power would course through me. This was mine. Every line of code, every successful campaign, every 5-star review was a product of my own mind and my own 2 hands. I wasn't just building a business. I was building a fortress of self-reliance. I watched from a distance as my sister posted carefully curated tours of her new home. The morning coffee on the balcony shot, the cozy night by the fireplace video. Each post was a flicker of the life they had chosen for her. A gilded cage. Meanwhile, I was earning my wings in a storm they couldn't even see. The gap between our realities wasn't a chasm of my failure. It was a measure of my trajectory. They were celebrating a single purchased peak. I was quietly mapping a mountain range, and my climb had only just begun. The silence I had cultivated was shattered by a violent, persistent buzzing that made my cheap desk vibrate. It was a sound out of place in my new world. A world that had grown to include a real office, with a view, and the quiet hum of a dedicated team. I glanced at my phone, now just one of many tools on my desk, and saw the notification avalanche. It was the family group chat, the one I had muted an eternity ago, now exploding with a frantic, chaotic energy. Dozens of messages piled up in a matter of seconds. A digital panic attack. My first, detached thought was that there had been an accident. But then I saw the snippets previewing on my locked screen. My name, over and over. My name, punctuated by question marks and exclamation points. Mom, is this a joke? Someone explain this right now. Dad, this has to be a different, my name. A typo. Chloe, lol, no way. That Photoshop fail. A cold, still, calm, settled over me. I knew. I opened my laptop, my fingers steady as I navigated to the Forbes website. There it was, the headline I had been secretly informed about just an hour prior, but had not yet fully absorbed. Forbes 30 under 30. Tech and innovation list, topped by self-made marketing prodigy. And below it, my name, my company's name, and a profile that detailed the very journey they had dismissed. I watched the chat continue to detonate, a real-time feed of their cognitive dissonance. Their disbelief was a palpable force, their scrambling attempts to rationalize it, a joke, a mistake, a fraud, were more telling than any apology could ever be. They were not celebrating. They were performing an autopsy on their own flawed judgment. I felt no urge to gloat, to explain, or to finally speak my truth into their chaos. Words I had learned were cheap. Evidence was power. I took a simple, clean screenshot of the Forbes article, capturing the headline, my name, and the logo in one definitive frame. I opened the group chat for the first time in over a year, watched the messages fly for a moment longer, and then, with a single tap, I posted the image. I did not type a single character. I let the screenshot do all the talking. It was a verdict, not an argument, a statement of fact that rendered their frantic questioning obsolete. I waited just long enough to see the first ellipsis bubble appear, my mother beginning to type a response that would never reach me. Then, with another tap, I pressed leave group. The explosion of their shock was a sound I was no longer obliged to hear. The silence that returned to my phone was no longer the silence of exile. It was the silence of sovereignty. If you are in a season of being underestimated, of being cut off from the support you thought you needed, know this. Your quiet exit is not a defeat. It is the first step on a path only you can walk. Let their doubt be the kindling for your ambition. Let their silence be the space where your own voice finds its power. Stop begging for a seat at their table. Go build your own empire. Lay your own bricks. And when you finally look down from the top, you won't even hear their cheers or their noise from up there. Leave a legacy, not a plea. Your name at the top of the list is the only response you will ever need.